Good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning into my presentation on corporate e-learning, a framework for designing training material. Just a very brief overview of what this project will be covering is a e-learning training design within the corporate setting and the framework that I created to aid the decision-making process of choosing an appropriate e-learning design model. The audience for this project are corporations, and I included a secondary audience as corporate employees since they're the ones who will be directly affected by the decisions made through this framework. And just like how people are all different from one another, so are corporations. Each corporation will have different needs and standards, and there isn't one e-learning design model out there that will be able to meet the needs of every single corporation. Learner control is also a very important component to factor in when designing training material in the corporate setting. Some corporations might want all their employees to complete their training within a given amount of time, whereas other corporations might provide more flexibility and allow their employees to complete their training on their own time. According to research, there has been an increase in the use of e-learning for a variety of reasons. Number one is that it's cost-effective. E-learning paves way for training to take place in a variety of virtual and online settings where there may or may not be an instructor present. For example, corporations that have a bigger number of employees with multiple global locations, a web-based learning model might be the best method for designing their learning material versus an instructor-led type of method where learners get together for a workshop and then are referred online where they can continue their training or access other tools and resources. It also provides flexibility in time and scheduling. There are often tight deadlines, and some corporations can be more fast-paced than others. E-learning training material allows employees to decide what works best for them, like when and where they want to complete their training. So because every corporation is so different, the decision on what kind of a design model to use is an extremely important decision, one that should be made right the first time since it takes so much money and resources to implement. So far in my research, I haven't found a framework that acts as a guide to walk corporations through the decision-making process of what kind of model would work best for them, which brings me to my framework. When I was processing through putting together this framework, I took into consideration that for an audience like corporations, time is money, and I wanted to create something that is as thorough but as simple as possible. I started looking at different e-learning design frameworks that were already out there, and one that I really liked was the 8-component framework for e-learning. Although there were 8 components, I only took 4 out of the 8 and added them to my framework. And that was just simply due to the fact that I felt there were some components that were redundant or just did not apply to my audience. The 4 components I took away were technological, management, resource support, and ethical considerations. So technological looks at the kind of technology infrastructure that will be used for the corporation's e-learning training environment. During this part of the framework is where corporations would make the decision on what kind of software they might want to use for their training material. Management focuses on how to maintain the learning environment of the corporation's choice and how the training material will be distributed. So for example, if a particular corporation wanted to create course modules, they would have to decide how this material would be accessed. Like, would employees be informed via email or word of mouth by their direct supervisor, and where and how they can access these course modules. Resource support includes support and resources employees can refer to before and after receiving the training material. This is a crucial sort of troubleshooting consideration for corporations. They have to decide how and where their employees can seek for this sort of support. Some examples of support includes help from the direct supervisor or a help desk where the employees can seek information on the training material. Resources can be in the form of Q&A and/or job aids that can maybe be accessed on the corporation's main website. Ethical considerations focuses on cultural diversity, learner diversity, information accessibility, and legal issues. Cultural diversity includes language and cultural barriers and how this might affect the delivery of the training material. Learner diversity could also affect delivery depending on how familiar the corporation's employees are on using technology, software, and programs online. So once taking these 4 components into consideration, I thought it would be crucial that 2 short questions be answered to bridge the corporation's needs and standards to the best e-learning design model. The first question is in regards to whether the training material they intend to have would be completely online, or would there be some face-to-face time, such as having a workshop and then referring the learners to learners online to access tools and resources, or maybe to take a test or a knowledge assessment of what was learned. And then the second question is that if a blended learning model is chosen, like both face-to-face and online, then which one would be the more dominant training method? So would the face-to-face be the dominant method, or would the online learning be the dominant method? For this framework, corporations will ultimately come down to having to choose one out of the 3 models displayed here. The a la carte blended learning model strictly involves online instruction. However, it does allow for some leeway in having some learning take place in a physical setting, such as a meeting room or a computer lab. Audio instruction and/or lectures can also be recorded and available online for the learners under this model. This is a very cost-saving method for employees, since an instructor does not have to be on site to conduct the training. And under this method, learners can also communicate virtually with an instructor for questions and support. For those who opt for a more blended learning model, they'll be referred to the other 2. Rotation blended learning involves both face-to-face and online study time, but with the dominance in online learning. So an example of this includes the completion of a course module that is accessible online, which is then followed by a short face-to-face workshop and/or like a group activity of some sort. This model offers a lot of flexibility in terms of time as well as content and audience. And last but not least is the enriched virtual blended learning model. It also involves both face-to-face and online learning, but this time it has a focus on the face-to-face learning. And this particular model, most of the training material is given face-to-face by an instructor, and then learners are referred to use online tools and resources after the training is over. The advantage of this model is that learners can always refer back to the online tools and resources as often and for as long as they'd like after the training is over. Some examples of online tools and resources for this model includes games, scenarios, and slideshow presentations. So just to recap this project, the goal is to assist corporations in deciding which e-learning design model would work best in designing their training material. And upon completing a walkthrough of this framework, they'll not only have a better understanding of their needs and standards, but then they'll also settle on the model that is best for them and their employees. In terms of a theory that best relates to this project and framework, I feel that connectivism relates best, since this is a framework that calls for a sort of learner autonomy by allowing them to choose the content and the context in which they learn. This also calls for the use of multiple tools and resources to aid learning, as well as a range of interactive communication. So as I stated earlier, I tried to make this framework as simple but as thorough as possible. And this was really hard to do because there were so many frameworks and models out there. Although I have limited it to the 3 models presented in this framework, it feels like this isn't the final framework, and I plan to do more research and maybe even merge models to create my own in order to best meet the needs that corporations may be looking for. This framework definitely needs improvement. This is just a very basic version of what I ultimately want to do in terms of design. At least I want to be able to make this framework even more easy to use by having corporations be able to walk away with like a like a macro and micro breakdown of what they reported wanting for a design model and how they can proceed with designing and implementing their training material. And so now I will walk you through the framework that I created. It was created on Adobe Captivate, and it's just very basic. So it starts out, e-learning design framework, a guide for corporations, and then it goes over the purpose of the whole framework, and then breaks it down into the 3 parts that the user will be going through, which are the 4 core components, determining the type of e-learning environment that is best, and then going through which design model would best meet the needs of the user. And then we list here the 4 core components: technological, management, resource support, and ethical considerations. And then it walks the user through each one. So technological, what is the e-learning environment you intend to have? And then some examples of programs and software are like Articulate, Storyline, Adobe Captivate. And then we go through management, how do you intend to distribute the learning material? Resource support, what kinds of support and or resources do you plan to provide your employees? And then last but not least, the ethical considerations. Are there any cultural and or learning diversities present at your corporation? And then this type of learning environment covers the questionnaire that I stated earlier, whether they want a completely online kind of environment, and then that would mean that their option would be a la carte blended learning model, and then it would end there. And then if they want a blended learning model, then they have these 2 options: the rotational blended learning model and the enriched virtual blended learning model. And then here are just the models that are available in this framework. So the a la carte blended learning model, completely online, and then just some other things here that are listed about the model. Rotational blended learning model, emphasis on online learning, and then the enriched virtual blended learning model, emphasis on face-to-face interaction. That is all I have. Thank you.